Hi, this is Lynn from Alamosa Quilt Company, and today I am going to share with you how to make a square in a square pillow. It's very simple. You don't have to be a quilter to do it. I'm going to walk you through every single step. So there's a Valentine version. This one is kind of a sophisticated Christmas. Neither one of these have binding, so that is an option. But if you do like binding on a pillow, and personally I do, but here's a blue kind of wintry one. We have kits for these, and the pattern. You don't need to buy both. If you buy a kit, the pattern is included in the kit. If you want a printed copy of the pattern, buy a kit. So let's get started and make one. Okay, what do you need to make a square in a square pillow? Well, if you buy a kit, you'll have everything that you need. You'll have all of the fabrics. You will need to add a scrap of batting if you want to put batting, or fusible fleece, which is what I'm using because it's fusible and it's easy. So what do you get in your kit? Besides the pattern, and you will need the pattern is available separately if you don't want a kit. You can just get the pattern. So you'll have to cut your fabrics. You're going to have 5 fabrics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Usually this is the back of the pillow, and usually we include binding. You can do binding or not, but you will have fabric to do binding. It only takes 1/8 of a yard. So you'll cut all your pieces. Okay, this is the center. If your center fabric is directional, make sure that you cut it so that when you put the center square on point, the design will be right side up. Okay, this one is not a directional fabric, so it doesn't matter. I just cut a square. We'll press it a little bit because it's got some wrinkles in it. Okay, and then these triangles will go around the outside of the square. So you're making a square in a square, hence the name, square in a square pillow. Okay. So these are going to get sewn on like this. Okay. So how to do that? Well, you need to mark the centers of the diagonal that's going towards the square, and you need to mark the centers of your square. The easiest way to do that is to take your square, fold it in half. You can just finger press, and I just take my fingernail and run it right across there to make a crease. It makes a mark enough that you can see it long enough, or you can put a pin, or make a mark with a pen or something like that. However you're going to do it, just mark the center. Do the same thing here, and then match up the centers. And I do pin them in place right there at the center. And if you want to put a few more pins in, go for it. I generally am not a pinner, so 1 pin in the center just to hold the center. And notice that your triangle is longer than your square. That's on purpose. So I like to do 2 sides first, and then sew those, press them, and then do the other 2 sides. So go with me to the sewing machine. Okay, 1/4 inch seams here. I'll sew these 2 sides. I'll press them, and then pin the other 2 triangles on there. Okay, two sides sewn. Come with me back to the ironing table. Okay, so press these however you want. Pressing everything away from the center is going to be the easiest. Even though the center is dark, I'm not going to worry about it. It'll be just fine. But if you want to press it towards the center, go right ahead. It really doesn't make a bit of difference. Just be consistent. Press them all the same way. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing with the other two triangles. Okay, and I'm going to line up the sides. Okay. Now I'm lining up the square. It gets a little harder when you put triangles on, so you can mark all the centers of your sides all at once if you want before you start. This time I'm going to iron them instead of finger pressing. And I'm going to pin it again. And again, look, the triangle is longer. That's the way it's supposed to be. Everything's fine. Just keep going. Match up that center. And again, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew there and there. Okay, again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Try not to stretch this. You've cut this edge that you're sewing on the bias. You don't want to make it longer than it's supposed to be. Okay, so here we go. It's all sewn. Now we need to press this and square it up, and you'll need to use the measurements in the pattern as far as to what size you need to square this up to. But things to keep in mind is you want 1/4 inch seam allowance from these points, or maybe slightly more depending on how wide your 1/4 inch seam allowance is. And I know 1/4 inch is supposed to be 1/4 inch, but we all know that that's not always the case. So the things to watch out for is to try to make sure that each one of these points is at least 1/4 inch from the edge. If they're a little bit more, great. Your center will float a little bit. If it's a little bit less, you might be cutting that point off. But this is a pillow, you know, life will go on. Everything will be fine if you cut the point off, okay? Get her done. Okay, here's my block all squared up, my center, and as you can see, there's just a little bit that gets trimmed off, all right? You're not gonna waste too much fabric. So you should only trim up a little bit. And as you can see here, my points are a tad more than 1/4 inch, or right at 1/4 inch. Okay, just try to center it. All right, do the best you can with that. Now the next thing is going to be the inner border, and your pattern will tell you to cut inner border strips 2 different widths, because you got, once you sew 2 sides on, your center is now longer. So that's why. So start with the short ones. I'll throw this away before I make a mess. So you'll take the 2 short ones, and it really doesn't matter if your center is not directional like mine. Just sew the 2 shorter ones on opposite sides, and then you'll take the longer ones and those will go on the other 2. If this is directional, then for most projects they want you to sew the sides on first and then the top and bottom. So, make this so that your image here is right side up, sew the sides on and then the top and bottom. So we'll go back to the sewing machine, and then after we do that, we're gonna do the same thing with the outer border. So again, we'll do the sides first and then the top and bottom. Okay, pin if you want to, all right, but if you've sewn and if you've trimmed this up and you cut these correctly, then everything should line up. But if you're a pinner, you go right ahead and pin. I am not a pinner. I am just going to sew it on there and hope for the best. Inner border 1 sewn on, inner border 2 right now. Okay, before you sew the other 2 sides on, take this to the iron and press, and your seam allowance will just, if you just press it just like this, your seam allowance is going to go towards this inner border. That's fine. So we're going to do that. Now take the 2 longer ones and sew those to the other 2 sides. That's side 3. Side 4. So here's something that happens a lot. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. So I cut this piece so it was supposed to fit on here perfectly. It hangs over about 1/8 of an inch. Okay. If this was a quilt and it was going to be a big quilt in particular, I might worry about that, because if you're off 1/8 of an inch 8 times, then that's a whole inch. That could be a problem. This is a pillow. I'm not worrying about it. What do? I line up with this. I line up with what I know I trimmed correctly. So there's a little bit hanging off. I'm going to put the edge of my foot right on the edge of this fabric, just right there, and I'm just not going to worry about it. So you could trim that off either before or after you sew if it bothers you. It doesn't bother me a bit. I'm not doing a single thing. Flipping it over, you can't tell. Who's going to know? Okay, I'm going to press this, and then I'm going to get my outer border, and we're going to sew those on the same way. Okay, so everything's pressed. So now, if you look here, okay, this is the piece I sewed on first because it's got the seams going across the end where I sewed second. So the next border needs to go on this side. Everything will, if you do it wrong, it's not a big deal. It just might look a little weird because you'll have things lined up, but your pieces will still fit. So again, I have a little bit of this fabric that's just a tad too long. It kind of tends to grow a little bit sometimes when you're sewing, especially if you pull. I wasn't pulling, but you know, this is a pillow. Okay. Keep in mind what you're making. So if you're a beginner, don't worry about it. Now, if you're a beginner and your seams are not, and your pieces are not matching up, it's most likely because you do not have a 1/4 inch seam allowance when you sewed. Your foot, the regular foot that comes with your machine, is probably not a 1/4 inch foot. 1/4 inch feet typically do not come with sewing machines. Of most brands, you have to actually get a 1/4 inch foot separately that works with your machine, or you need to make some sort of mark with tape. You can see here I've got this diagonal seam tape, which is also good. The way that works, 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can see the black line right there is just barely peeking out. I use this edge of the black line, the one that's inside there. So the red lines up with my needle, and then a 1/4 inch seam. So there's that tape, but I mean, there's all sorts of ways to mark your machine. All right, but using a 1/4 inch seam allowance is very important if you want everything to go together correctly. Okay, take the other shorter outer border piece and put it on the opposite side. Let's see, we sewed that one, so now we're going to do this one. And you can see here, this was the second piece we sewed on, so we need to go on this side first. And before we sew on the last two outer border pieces, press again. Okay, and if you just press it like that, then the seam allowance is going to lay flat, go like that. You'll be pressing towards the outer border. Okay, and you'll notice that this time, when I sewed, I was a little bit more careful. And so these all ended properly. Okay, and that's because when I laid down the piece, I made sure that it fit all the way across, and I was holding this end so that the top piece couldn't grow. So there are ways to, if you just pay attention, and I just wasn't. But again, it is just a pillow, all right? And so I get about halfway down, and then I come to the end down here and I match this up and I hold that with my finger. If I was a pinner, I'd be pinning it, but I'm not a pinner, I'm just holding it. See, it did like it was supposed to. One more side, and the top of our pillow is done. Again, I'm grabbing the end and matching them up. Okay, so we're going to press this. Meet me around at the ironing station. Okay, so I'm going to press these last two sides here. Okay. And so let me raise the camera up so you can see a little bit. So there we go. There's our square and a square pillow. Sorry, the camera's a little wobbly. I don't have a cameraman, it's just me. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and prep my back pieces. So you're going to cut two back pieces. This is an envelope back, is what it's called to finish a pillow. So I'm going to prep this backing fabric. You want to take it and press the edge under about 1/4 of an inch. I don't measure, I can eyeball 1/4 of an inch. If you can't, measure it if you want. There are all sorts of seam guides and things. And then press it under again one more time. This conceals the raw edges so that if you ever have to wash your pillow cover, you're not going to it's not going to fray. And then we're going to top stitch that down. So we got to do the same thing with the other one. And then fold it under again. Okay, we're going to take this over and we're going to top stitch these down, and then the back we won't need to do anything with for a minute, because I'm going to show you how to quilt the front. Okay, I'm not going to be able to get my camera high enough so that you can see the whole thing at once, but I have a square of batting. This is fusible fleece, so I have it with the fused side up. This is the rough side, and I'm going to put my pillow top right over the top, and I am going to fuse the pillow top to the batting. There are all kinds of fusing products on the market. If you have your favorite fusible, do that. You do not have to use fusible batting. You can just use regular batting. The other samples and things that I've shown you that I used whatever I had. And I'll show you my favorite fusible product in just a minute. Turn this around so that I can get it all fused. This is small enough you can just, put a few pins in it for the amount of quilting that we're going to do. That'll be just fine. Don't worry about it if you don't have a fusible batting. Okay, so it's fused to the front. Now my machine does not like to feed plain batting or fusible fleece. It gets caught in the feed dogs and it feeds weird, so I always put something on the back. I have a scrap of Christmas fabric that was backing for something else, and this is not going to be seen anywhere in the pillow except at the, you'll see it if you take the pillow form out, and I'm going to put it, I can put it the other way. I'll do it this way. And I'm going to fuse this with free fuse powder. Okay. I love this fusible. I like it way better than spray based. There's no brand of spray based that doesn't stink that I know of. There might be some now, I don't know, but they all overspray, and the overspray is the problem. It gets sticky everywhere. This does not. This is a powder. The hard part about this is it's white, and most batting is white. So I'm going to sprinkle it on, but you're probably not going to be able to see it. So I'm just sprinkling it on. You don't need a whole lot. Put the backing right over the top, and then you iron. Now you're going to want to, you can't just iron like this and be done. It's the heat that activates the glue. So you need to hold the iron in place for several seconds so that area can get hot enough to melt the glue. If you don't get it all melted, it's just powder. You can heat it up again. It will be just fine. If a little bit of the powder sprinkles over, you get some little over sprinkle, you can vacuum it up. You can just open up the top of the container and brush it back in. As long as you don't heat it, it's not going to stick to anything. And it's not going to be sticky. So now I need to do the other half of this. So I'll just flip it over, and you can peel it back, and you'll be able to feel right there. That's where I stopped. So I'm going to sprinkle some more powder over here. And this is just a pillow, and this is not going to get seen at all. So if I get wrinkles in the back of this, who cares? No one's going to see it. Nobody but me, and I'm not telling. And now I'm going to just heat that. You can use this free fuse powder on both sides. I do it all the time. It does not gum up your needle. unless you put a big glob. That probably is going to be a problem. But like I said, if you get too much, you can always just fold your project up like this and tip it back into the container. It'll be just fine. It doesn't gum up your needle. It will wash out. It's semi-permanent, which means it washes out. It's permanent until it gets wet and you wash it. But this free fuse powder is absolutely awesome. Here, I'll show you what it looks like. Can you see in there? It's a little powder. I'll put some in my hand. Kind of looks like salt, but it's not. It's a powder form of fusible web. So if you've used fusible web, this is what it looks like in powder form. Okay, now we're going to quilt this, and I'm going to show you how to do this. You can quilt this however you want. Stitching it in the ditch, and you don't even have to quilt it if you don't want to. You could just trim this up and go to the next step, but I think adding a little bit of quilting is nice. So I'm going to do super simple quilting, and I'm going to show you right now with a chopstick what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start in a corner somewhere, and I'm going to sew to here, and then I am going to put my needle down, adjust the fabric, and I'm going to go all the way around the center square right back to here, and then I'm going to continue and go all the way around the center here, and then I'm going to cut my thread, and I'm going to come over here, or I might not even cut my thread. I might just do a little knot here and then jump over here and cut the thread after, and then I'm going to sew all the way around here again in the ditch and come back up. Okay, and that's all the quilting I'm going to do. Okay, I'm changing my foot. I'm going to use my walking foot for quilting. It's also called an even feed foot. The reason it's called a walking foot or an even feed foot is this part right here goes over the needle bar. Wherever the little screw that you use to change your needle that holds your needle in place on your machine, this goes over that. And can you see the feed dogs going up and down on the foot? So this works in conjunction with the feed dogs on your machine. So the feed dogs will smash together. Feed dogs on the foot, feed dogs on the machine, smash together, and they move your fabric together. Hence the name even feed foot, because it's feeding everything evenly, all the layers, or walking foot because it looks like it's walking. So I got to get this on my machine. And I also switched to black thread because why not? Okay, so I'm going to start, like I said, right in one of these corners. And I'm going to put my needle down. And then I'm going to pull the needle right back up and pull everything here, and I'm pulling up that bobbin thread. Okay, for the pillow, probably not super important that you do that because like I said, the back of this is going to be hidden by the pillow form. No one's going to really see it, but if you don't pull the bobbin thread up, you can get bird's nests, a big knot of thread and stuff at the back of your project. So if you ever have that, that's why, is because you're not holding these. So I'm going to hold them and then just go. And I'm going right in the ditch. I pressed everything out. So the seam is over here. So I'm sewing over here because this is the ditch. Okay, now I'm coming right here to this point. Okay, and now I'm going to turn and I'm going to go all the way around the center square, on the center square in the ditch. Stop with my needle down when I get to that corner and pivot and turn. Keep going. Again. Okay, one more side on the center. Okay, we're back where we started from on the center. And so now we're going to continue around the inner border. And you can see my threads here where I started. I'm going to go ahead and clip those, get them out of the way. Okay, and I'm going to just do one back stitch and then forward again just to tack it down. I'm going to raise my needle up, and then I'm not even clipping my threads. I'm just going to come right over here to this corner. And go around the inner border, between the inner border and the outer border. And again, I'm going to just take one back stitch, pull it up. I'm going to clip my threads, and I'm going to clip this. And then I'll clip the one on the back for good measure. Okay, so we're going to top stitch because I've got black backing fabric. I did change my thread to black. Okay, and there's top stitch feet and all sorts of feet you can get. I just use my 1/4 inch foot, and what you're going to see is my 1/4 inch foot has this notch here. So I have the inner part of this piece, I call these skis. So the inner part of the left ski runs right along the fold here. And then I get a nice even stitching. And I just leave the stitch length as my default stitch length. I don't worry about that. It's a pillow. And I don't even clip the threads, I just take the next one. Get it loaded properly. Keep going. Okay, it's hard to see on that side, but yeah, maybe you can see there. Okay, so I've top stitched both of them. Okay, we are almost done. So let's layer these and we'll finish. Okay, I've got my pillow front all quilted. Oops, next thing I need to do is I need to trim this even with the pillow top. Okay, here's the back. You can see the quilting better on the back. So I'm going to go trim that. Okay. All trimmed up. The bits that you trimmed off, that's just trash. Okay, now at this point, again, you probably want to pay attention to which is the right side. Okay, and so if I was looking at it, so this, it would have to be like this or 180 degrees for right side up. Okay, I have my backing pieces. So this is the edge here that was that I seamed, that I top stitched, and you want to line these up. Now if your backing piece, things might have shrunk a tad when you quilted. If your backing is now a tad wider than your pillow, just go ahead and whack the backing even. Okay, but what you want is when you put your backing on, all right, you want these two pieces that you hemmed, they need to be in the middle, and you'll notice they're not long enough to go all the way to the edge. We're trying to leave a hole in here so you can put your hand in. A hole so you can put your hand in. And that's where the pillow form goes. So I put one piece down and I'm lining up the edges all the way, and it goes down as far as it goes. And I'm going to put a few pins in. This I do actually pin, and I try to put the pins out of my way. So I'm not going to put them right at the edge. I'm going to put them in a little bit. And I like to angle one at the corner and put one in the middle. And I'm going to put one here on the sides. No, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to put the other piece on. That pin will be in my way if I do that. So never mind, don't do that. So I've got 3 along that edge. And now I'm going to get the other piece. And again, raw edges go to the outside. The top stitched edge needs to be in the middle. And they're going to overlap a good bit. So again, I'm going to put one in each corner. And one here in the center. And then I like to mark where this bottom one stops. So I'm going to put a pin right there. And then I'm going to put a pin here. And I'm going to back stitch. When I get to this, I'm going to back stitch right here, and I'm going to back stitch right here. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. These are going to be stress points because you're going to shove that pillow form in there, and that's not a gentle process. So again, where is it? It's right there. I'm trying to pin it so that pins are not in my way. Right there. And now we're going to go to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all the way around. We'll turn it, and you'll be done. Okay, again, 1/4 inch seam. Doesn't really matter where you start, but I like to start, I don't know, I'm going to start at this corner. Doesn't really matter where you start. And I'm going to start right at the edge, or just a tad in. Doesn't really matter. And I'm sorry my walking foot squeaks a little bit. I need to get my service tech to take a look at it and maybe put some oil somewhere, but okay, I'm right at that first hemmed part. I'm going to stitch forward, and then I'm going to go back, and then forward again. And then here I am at the next one. I'm going to go over it, and I'm going to go back, and then forward again, all the way to the corner. I'm going to stop 1/4 inch from the corner. My foot has a marking for 1/4 inch from the corner, so I'm using my foot. If your foot does not have a marking, then you'll need to make one. And just a little dot will do it. Okay. Keep going. Oh, crap. I just ran out of bobbin. All right. We'll try this again. Now we're back in business. Sorry, had to wind a bobbin. Continue on to the corner. Turn. And again, I'm going to back stitch here. And then the next one is back here. Okay, I can feel it with my finger. I went over it, so now I'm going to back over it. Okay, and that's the last side, so I just sewed right off the edge. Let's clip my threads. Dropping stuff on the floor. Okay, I'm gonna pull the pins out and meet you back around at the ironing surface. Okay, so we've sewed all the way around. Okay. And I like to clip the corners. It just helps the corner. So when you clip it, you don't want to clip where you sewed, but you just clip a little bit away. And this will help your corners to stay pointier. And then we're going to birth our pillow, and I'm going to get my handy dandy turning tool. It's just a chopstick from the local Chinese restaurant. So tuck it through, pull. And right now I'm just trying to get it right side out. And see, that backing fabric is in there, but no one's going to see it. So use whatever you got. That's where I like to put something left over that I know I'm not going to use for something else, or some of that, oh my gosh, what was I thinking when I bought this fabric? And just poke the corners out as best you can. You don't want to poke through, okay? But poke them out. One more. Okay, you can hit it with the iron if you want. At this point, it will help things. So just kind of pull. Ooh, that corner's not very good. This pillow had 5 corners. Not really. Just felt like 5. Okay, so I'm just going to lay it flat Hit it with the iron a little bit there. This helps. Do this side. And last. And there we go. We have a finished pillow. The only thing left to do is to shove a pillow form in there and throw it on your couch or your chair or whatever you're going to do with it. So, square and a square pillow. Very simple.